Ser dona da minha empresa me ensinou que por trás de toda grande mulher, existem outras mulheres que ajudaram ela a chegar lá. Foi o suor da minha mãe que pagou meus estudos. E foi só com o apoio da minha irmã que eu consegui cuidar do meu negócio e dos meus filhos ao mesmo tempo. Já cresci, já caí, já reinventei meu negócio, mas nunca fiz nada sozinha. Por isso a gente tem uma regra. Quando uma mulher sobe, ela puxa as outras para cima. Sebrae, a força da empreendedora brasileira.
Strange. Next week I'll be in Barcelona for the Triple Helix Association Conference, and we are going to present the Brazilian proposition to host the 2024 conference in Brazil. And we are
excellent.
in a competition with the Abu Dhabi and Serbia. Hopefully, we are going to organize that in Brazil next year. Let's see.
Yeah, well, that would be excellent. Obviously, I would be making sure to attend.
Yeah, of course. Max, and we talked some time ago about trying to bring a IEEE conference to Brazil as well. You had some connections with this guy, so
I do, yes. Should be possible, yeah.
Yeah, let's do that for 25 or something like that. We're going to have some time to talk about the subject next October.
Yeah? Yeah, definitely. I just got a feedback from Leandro that the link did not work for him either.
Oh my God! Did you send him the last one that I sent to you?
Because that was still the one I think I sent yesterday or 2 days ago. So I just sent him one that I
sent you today. This is the one that is working. I tried to enter it with the old one, that didn't work. Send the new one. The last one I send it to you, please. Leonardo puts the correct link in the website here in the chat as well, if you want to use that. What is the one
that's the one I use, yeah. I can see that we're already streaming on YouTube.
Yeah, yes, we are.
With a bit of a delay, like 1 or 2 minute delay.
It's a problem. I'm not sure if it, but I can see you in here as well. Look at that. Ralf, are you a student at the Copenhagen Business School?
I am at the University of St. Gallen in Switzerland. So.
St. Gallen. The same orange of Max, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a bit distance to Copenhagen. It's like Germany in between.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, but nowadays, in terms of global teams and global research, really that should matter less and less. All right, I see that we're all here. We're all here. I can see that Leandro and Markus are here as well. Excellent. Leandro, you're still there without a picture.
Leonardo, we are waiting for your signal to start, okay?
You can start.
Okay.
Oh,
so I'm here just to say a great welcome to our panel, our moderator, and our panelists. I will spend 1 minute in that, and then Max is going to take care of this. I want to say that I first met Max in a conference at Copenhagen Business School. It was 2012, and for a coincidence, we sat in the same table in the dinner, and then we started talking. I said, Max, I'm using some of your papers in our graduate course at the University of São Paulo, starting innovation in global strategy and innovation. And then we started talking, and then I provoked him. Max, I think that in your research network, there is a missing point in Latin America. What about creating a Latin America connection? So, Max, okay, now it's your turn. You are going to be the director of GLORAD in Latin America. And then we started this partnership, and Max has come to Brazil as a visiting professor in the last 5 years. This year will be the 6th year. Max is coming in November. And then I'm honored to say there, because of the provocation of Marx, I also applied to a professorship at Copenhagen Business School, and I'm going to spend some months in 2023 and 2024 at CBS. It's a great honor for me. I know some of the other familiar face, Leandro. Hi, Leandro. How are you? And a pleasure meeting.
Hi.
Hi, Ralf and Markus. And that's all. Max, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Moacir, for this kind introduction, giving a little bit of background on GLORAD and on this panel. Why we have this panel, perhaps in the first place.
Yeah,
and the honor really is mutual.
I'm leaving. But explain GLORAD, please. Bye.
I will. And actually, I have a few slides on that as well to the audience. And by the way, welcome to this panel on global innovation and global R&D, the Emerging Scholars panel, in fact. I have a few slides prepared to introduce everybody and introduce the topic. So if Leonardo allows me, I will be able to share my slides and have a soft start into this panel so that everybody has an opportunity to catch up on speed. By the way, this is a video cast on YouTube. So for my fellow panelists that in case you're worried and looking at the Zoom link, you don't see everybody else in the audience, just as panelists, because everybody else is in fact on the YouTube streaming channel. All right. So in the meantime, you should see the title slide. Emerging Scholars in Global Innovation. Just a couple of words on the background. Why I'm here and what are we doing here? I'm a frequent visitor to Brazil, and Professor Moacir has asked me on numerous of these occasions to run a panel on one of the conferences. So this panel really has quite a bit of history and depth already. We're going back, I would say nearly a decade by now. And this time we will have 3 emerging scholars rather than the typical mid-career or even end-career scholars who tend to be invited to these panels. And I thought, why don't we take a look at what's actually going to come in the future? What are these people that perhaps in 10, 15 years are going to be more regularly invited to panels? What are they talking about already? Now, what kind of work are they doing? And here we have 3 people from the GLORAD network, from this research center that I will be introducing in a minute. Ralf Mischkowski, he is from the University of St. Gallen, which is actually one of the founding members of the GLORAD Center. Leandro Lima Santos from the University of Sao Paulo, who was actually at Copenhagen Business School for I think the better part of 5 or 6 months, just this year and last year, which was great for us to collaborate or actually great for us to continue and extend and intensify our collaboration, because we've been collaborating already before. So good to see you again, Leandro. And Markus Estner, who is currently at Copenhagen Business School, just defended a master thesis, which is really driving forward the way we do research on global R&D and innovation. I wanted really to give an opportunity to all 3 of them to introduce themselves and speak a little bit about what it is that they do and why they think it is interesting and relevant. And I hope that some of the excitement will jump over to you, to the members of the audience. And if you have any questions about what it is that's happening, please feel free to ask those questions. If you have any comments on, how this makes sense to you, please raise them. We're really, really interested to hear from you how this works in your company, how this works in your context, or how this might, in fact, make sense also in your context. All of this research that we do is based in industry, in companies, in fact. So we're not inventing anything, and we're not just reading literature. We're not just reading books and stuff like that. All of this research is based very much in the actual events of how companies strategize, execute, and implement global R&D and innovation. So we will be able to back up anything that we are saying here. So before I hand over to Ralf, let me talk for a few moments about GLORAD and this research center that Professor Morrissey already so kindly used in his introduction to this panel, and what his connection is, in fact, to GLORAD. I founded GLORAD back in 2003 when I was in China, and in fact, this is a little bit of a background about myself. But this research center was created back in 2003 when I joined Tsinghua, a university in Beijing in China, and you can see this here from my mini CV, where I felt the need to remain connected to what's going on in terms of research elsewhere. So this was really a joint research center between St. Gallen University, which is where Ralf is located now, and Tsinghua University in China. And it was very much also an extension of some of my earlier work, which I've worked on for my PhD, which was on leveraging distances and global R&D and innovation, hence the term GLORAD, which is short for Global R&D. And we added the innovation later on because that's really what the results of R&D are supposed to be. They are supposed to go into innovative products, innovative processes, innovation more generally. And out of the course of time, since 2003, this is literally 20 years ago, we've been able to come up with some cool stuff. Some of these things I've listed here as well as research highlights, whether this is the, for instance, a three-phase roadmap for organizational efficiency, which I've been developing with colleagues when I was in China, mostly looking at Chinese R&D centers, I should say R&D centers by multinational companies in China, which is a 5 to 10 year roadmap managing the development of product development capabilities in the long term. Or, for instance, a reverse innovation toolkit, which is helping companies to leverage inventiveness, and innovation in developing countries, in emerging countries, and really applying this worldwide. And in fact, what Leandro is doing is an extension of this reverse innovation toolkit. He's taking it one step forward from what commonly is just applied to a fairly boring, I might say, very boring product or technology type of innovation. So that's sort of, in a nutshell, my own personal, professional history that has led to eventually the establishment of GLORAD, an establishment going beyond the original two founding members, St. Gallen University again and Tsinghua in China, and eventually including other universities, as we have met, for instance, Moazir, who really correctly, rightly pointed out, Max, you guys are not covering Latin America. Let me help you. So Moazir joined, when University of Sao Paulo eventually joined this network in 2016. We've extended with a team also in Silicon Valley at San Jose State University in 2014. We have a team in Lithuania covering Eastern Europe at Kaunas University of Technology. And for some time, we had a team also at Skoltech, which is a Russian science and technology university with a dedicated entrepreneurship, innovation, research team. We were there, in fact, for several years. Before the official opening in 2018, we had already a few people there. I was actually working at Skoltech for a few years before that as well. So there was a good connection. But obviously, due to recent events, and some of these events are obviously connected to the war in the Ukraine. Another event was that 2 of the key people actually moved away to Germany. So now we have a better connection in Germany. And unfortunately, we had to discontinue our activities in Moscow, at least in this organized war. And last but not least, as of 2020, when I joined SciBiz in Denmark, we are very much focused on transferring the expertise, the knowledge, the progress of doing global innovation, global R&D between industrial practice and research and scientific insight. So how can we connect those two? How can we align? How can we synchronize those two? And for that, we have several research themes which are represented through our research associates, through our postdocs, through our professors who are leading the individual teams in these various locations. Now, who are these people? I don't expect you to know all of them, but you may see one or another name that perhaps you have come across. For instance, Felipe Borini, who is also in Sao Paulo, or for instance, Dan Prudhomme, who has quite recently published very well in Journal of International Business Study, Harvard Business Review, Sloan Management Review, or for instance, Julian Birkinshaw, who's on our advisory board, who's one of the most cited scholars in terms of management innovation, a professor at London Business School. So there's some really good people associated with this, and I think we, beyond the common interest in the topic, and they align quite nicely. I think there's also just a very good team spirit between these people. One other feature, I think, which I would like to point out here is the fact that this network really permits students and researchers to find an immediate docking station in another continent. So just as Professor Morris here mentioned before, he's going to come to Copenhagen Business School. So that's a perfect example of what GLORAD is doing and why GLORAD exists, to make these visits possible. Like I may say, Leandro was actually here as well. It was a natural way to connect. And there was at least 3 dozen other students over the course of time have moved between Switzerland and China, Brazil and California, California and Copenhagen, Russia, and you name it. And whether these were students, PhD and postdocs, or already established professors, it really doesn't matter. It's always really helpful. This is just to visualize a bit the footprint itself, where GLORAD has teams and the kind of the topics that we pursue. While I have been putting in, and it's always easy to place some of these headshots of the people who are locally professors at these universities, the actual topics are a little bit more difficult to tie to a particular location, because very often the people working on these topics are actually located in multiple centers and multiple teams. So, for instance, Leandro, you're now in Brazil, but we've been working together on this topic while I was in Denmark, or even before that, when I was still in California. So there's literally 3 continents involved. And this is not unusual that we are collaborating across the Atlantic or the Pacific on these joint projects. Speaking of these collaborations, nowadays everybody's team crazy, and we like to work in teams. We may not like to work on teams all the time, speaking about the IT platform, but it's really just how things are being done these days. And we need to be able to pull things off as part of virtual projects, as part of non-co-located teams that actually do research together, and they do develop something tangible of a tangible output together. And as you can see here from a little bit from this color coding, it may not be easy, but it's more often than not, in fact, I can say we're actually quite successful at getting things done in these cross-border, actually intercontinental teams. And even in the few instances where things did not work out so well, at least I can attest to the fact that it was fun. And I'm in great contact with anybody who has been part of GLORAD at some point, and it has moved on in the meantime. And some of these people have moved on, and they've gone into industry. They've gone into consulting. Quite a few of them, in fact, to McKinsey. I'm not sure I should be worried about this. We may be sending the wrong signals here. And some of them actually have stayed in academia and have become professors in their own right in the meantime. Now, in terms of output, GLORAD is a research network, a research center. It's not a consulting organization. So one of the main orientations in terms of output is always going to be publications. And I'm glad to say that we're not doing too badly across the some 25, 30 people actively engaged at any given point of time. You would expect quite a bit of publications happening. And that is indeed the case. There's always somebody who has a really good publication every year. We also have more to come, more research that's currently being worked upon. And the 3 panelists may recognize their own projects somewhere on this list as well. But there are more projects, more teams, more really good people elsewhere in this network who could back up much of this work here as well. On the right-hand side of this slide, you see some of the core databases that we have been developing over the course of these many years in the meantime. And we've been able to tap into that both for the benefit and purpose of the individual scholars. Some of them graduate students working on master theses, PhD theses, and some of them more advanced researchers who may also be able to use that in order to provide in-depth expertise to more professional clients outside. And that's almost pretty much it. This is just a list of many of the concluded projects, anything from, frugal innovation, for instance, which we've been doing several projects, in fact, through the University of Sao Paulo, to projects that are more located and connected to China, or global projects, global R&D development projects, which have had more of an origin, in fact, in Europe and the United States. But I really didn't want to continue talking about this for too long and hand over more quickly now to our 3 panelists. And for that, let me go back to the beginning of this slide set, where we had the 3 panelists up here. And really just start with Ralf, with whom we've been working for, Ralf, you will have to remind me, and you probably will in a minute, for several years, in fact, while he was actually still, quote unquote, a bachelor student, but has done some marvelous work on patent research and cultural distances. Before we then have Leandro, and Leandro is a more advanced student. He's just finished his PhD. Congratulations, Leandro. And then we'll have Markus wrap it up for us and speak about some of the most recent work, in fact, that's been done here for global R&D locations. Ralf, may I ask you to come online and share with us a little bit about yourself, about the project that you're working on, and why is this exciting? Why is it relevant? Why is it part of global R&D and innovation? Okay, and I may have to stop sharing so that you can actually share any of your slides.
Yes, exactly. So I prepared a few slides, and first of all, thank you for the kind introduction and also for the opportunity to speak about the research I did and also then later on extended throughout the GLORAD network, later on with Professor von Zedtiwitz and Professor Willoughby. I'm just setting up the screen sharing, one moment. Work as expected. 1 minute, I'm almost. Some technical difficulties. I just need to find the right screen. One moment. So
That's all right. I'm juggling with this all the time myself.
Okay, so can you see the PowerPoint slides?
Yes.
Yeah, great. Okay, and you can hear me clearly?
Yeah.
Super. So yes, so initially this project started as a bachelor thesis at the University of St. Gallen, and it's related to the topic of cross-border patenting and cultural distances. But before I jump into the topic, I wanted to give a quick overview of my background. Moment. So I have a business background from the University of St. Gallen. That's where I did my bachelor. And currently I'm doing my master's degree in the field of business innovation, as well as the University of St. Gallen. And in addition to studying, I also gathered some experience in the Swiss consulting and medical devices industry. And next to this more professional field, I also started to do research at GLORAD, especially in the fields of culture, international patenting, and quantitative analysis. And during my bachelor thesis, I was interested in cultural relationships and also the impact of stuff like historic memories upon economic outcomes. And throughout this process, I devised a research question together with Max, and eventually we settled upon the following question: how do cultural differences influence international knowledge collaborations? And now you might be asking, why is this important? So it is important because for companies to remain competitive, they need to be able to tap technical knowledge globally. And there are unfortunately a lot of barriers that make it hard, such as physical distance. And there are like two big perspectives in this research field. So I'm going to give you a bit of background on this topic. So on the one hand, we have this one perspective that distance is dead. And you might say, okay, we have Zoom calls and now we have also the metaverse. Why should we even bother about that anymore? But on the other hand, we also see that knowledge isn't distributed equally globally. So there are some centers like Shenzhen or certain parts in the US that gather a lot of knowledge. And you should be there as a company in order to access that knowledge. And within this stream of research, I got also interested into finding out what potential barriers there are. And especially, I wanted to look at them from a cultural perspective. And I also created a brief visualization of the issue at hand. This is the International Co-Invention Network, or it's a patent network. And it shows the global innovation streams for selected countries. And here you can see by the, if you look at the lines, the lighter the blue is, the stronger the innovation flow is. And you instantly see that the US has a key role in this network because it has certain big knowledge streams on co-invention flows. whereas other countries, like for instance, Chile or maybe Indonesia or South Africa, are a bit more distant. And this is an issue for those countries, because in order to grow or also to catch up, tapping into these knowledge pools is very important, and also to create innovative patents. But this also raises the questions, so how do I transfer knowledge over such a long distance? Why is it still that hard? And research provides us with multiple answers or multiple barriers that have been found. So first of all, it's the physical distance. So it's pretty clear, so it's harder to collaborate with someone over a long distance. Secondly, economic inequalities are also an issue among partners, as well as technical differences, because you should be ideally on the same technical level of development in order to collaborate more. But then there are also some language barriers, such as having a common language or even colonial ties that can help with increasing the amount of exchanged knowledge. And there's also a distinction that might be important here to mention, because when we talk about knowledge and also co-inventing a patent with someone from abroad, then there are like two important elements when it comes to knowledge. So first of all, we have a tacit part and an explicit part, which was also described by Polanyi. And one good example of this is explaining to someone how to ride a bike. For instance, I can easily explain how it works, but how do you explain that to someone who never rode a bike? Because this tacit knowledge isn't simply available. And it gets even harder to transfer tacit knowledge over long distance, for instance, from China to the US or from Japan to the US. And this makes this knowledge transfer harder. But then throughout the research, we identified also one important gap that wasn't fully answered, interestingly, and this is the cultural aspect of collaboration. Because having the same language isn't necessarily fully the same thing as being similarly culturally. And to answer this question, we used well-established frameworks like those from Hofstede, who came up with a theory on culture, also in a business context, and quantified cultural distances between countries. And in the research literature, there's an interesting theoretical background upon that. So on the one hand, we see that we have this double-edged sword metaphor. So we see that on the one hand, culture can increase the number of cross-border co-creation of innovations. So having different cultures can be actually enriching for innovation on the one hand, because, for instance, you come up with more creative ideas, and that might be also more valuable because you have teams with different cultural backgrounds. But on the other hand, we also find at the same time that cultural distance or having different cultures can lead to negative outcomes, like increasing conflicts, as well as also a decrease in trust, because sometimes there was reported that some teams have issues in understanding another person's behavior due to cultural differences. And this was the intriguing aspect of conducting this research, because before that, it wasn't fully clear whether cultural distance is a driver or a barrier of international knowledge flows in this research projects, and also related to co-creation of patents. And so we analyzed a significant chunk of data from the OECD and found two insights across different cultural frameworks. And these insights might be also interesting for decision makers that need to access knowledge globally. So first of all, we found that cultural distance is unfortunately an additional barrier to collaboration, because it can be seen more as a cost, because it makes collaborating harder, unfortunately. So we do not find directly evidence for the positive theory. And secondly, we also find an interesting exception to the rule. So we see that the cost of cultural differences is negligible in contexts where there's high economic distance between partners. It can even be a small driver of that. But this is a specific exception. Overall, cultural distance or cultural differences should be more considered as a form of cost. So, and this should also be incorporated then by decision makers. Yes, and so these are so far the most interesting insights of our research. And maybe you might be also wondering, how do you even quantify cultural distance and recalculate like a distance measure based upon those different culture frameworks, so that you can compare the closeness of two countries, like their distance in kilometers. For instance, Germany and Switzerland is probably culturally more close than Germany and Brazil, for instance. And these are our main takeaways from the research. And also, that's also what drove me into this field, because we saw that there was a gap and it wasn't fully answered. And it's also very important for decision makers, and we wanted to help provide them with some insights on this issue. Okay, and these are like my main important points. Do you maybe want something to add here, Max?
No, I just wanted to thank you, Ralf. Thank you for keeping it to the point and relatively brief as well. I think this will help the audience to remember the highlights of each one of you. And honestly, and as a personal feedback, I'm glad that you felt strongly motivated about the sort of the research gap in this as well, and it was not just something to tumble into, basically. But thank you, Ralf, for your exposition of your project. And I for just to make this clear for everybody, I would suggest that we have all three panelists give these brief position statements about their research before we lead into a Q&A, and you have the opportunity to raise these questions through the channel on YouTube, or in the worst case, you contact the moderator of this call directly. But I think it's all set up through YouTube, so you can put this into the chat right there. I would suggest to continue with Leandro, and who's actually local. He could theoretically be physically present at the conference venue right now, but this is a virtual call. So Leandro, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Professor Max. Good morning, everyone. Good morning to the audience. It's a big pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me for this session. I'd like to say hi to Ralf and Markus. It's a pleasure to share with you guys, and nice to meet you all. Let me share my screen. Do you guys see the full presentation? Okay, well, let's get started. Speaking shortly about myself. I had my academic career, it's just the beginning, I know, but it has been, except for my first bachelor degree, my first undergrad course, which was in computer science, is based on business administration. I did a second bachelor's degree, as you can see, in business administration. And I also did my master's and my PhD at University of São Paulo in business administration. So yeah, this is the path I'm following now. Speaking about my research focus, I basically focus on knowledge management and innovation management. And in the international business field, I focus on innovation in emerging markets, reverse knowledge transfer, reverse innovation, and recently, at my last research, I focused on the development of capabilities, local and global capabilities, in the context of multinational and subsidiaries. Well, moving on, I tried to make, in order to link my current research, I started to make a connection with my past research. So you guys can see how I linked my past research to the ongoing research. During my master's degree, I started to study frugal innovation, which is innovation, a sort of innovation specific for the context of emerging markets. It started in emerging markets because it's a kind of innovation related to resource-constrained environments, which is something that affects a lot emerging markets. And the first research I did was this paper, which was published in the READS, which is entitled "In Search of the Frugal Innovation Strategy." And at that time, this research aimed to analyze the main features of frugal innovation, the frugal innovation literature, that unfold its current perspectives and business strategy. Because at the time I saw that this topic was a hot topic, and in the literature, the frugal innovation, there wasn't a consensus, as I can say, at what it was. Some researchers addressed as a kind of innovation, but others as a concept or as a strategy. And I followed the path. I argued that the frugal innovation can be a strategy, because although it started in emerging markets, it could also be useful for developed countries based on some features that, although the frugal innovation was developed for unmet needs from emerging markets, they also started to be useful for developed countries because they also started to face resource scarcity, and also because of one of the dimensions of the frugal innovation, which is the frugality principle, which means that customers from developed markets didn't want anymore to pay for expensive products with unnecessary features that make them more costly. And that's how this strategy became also important for the frugal innovation. And as an outcome of this research, I organized this I proposed this framework, which was, we have the scope, the context, analyze the context of the frugal innovation strategy, considering non-developed countries and developed countries, but also the dimensions of the value proposition of the frugal innovation. So this framework analyzed in which stage of the frugal innovation the country could be addressing based on these 4 blocks here, in order to reach the highest level, which is the frugal innovation strategy. So as you can see, looking at value proposition, when the frugal innovation was more developed based on economic features to make the products or services more accessible to customers, less costly for companies during the production, and based on non-developed countries, we had a frugal innovation orientation. But when this comes more to economic and social environmental issues, it has become to a different stage where the frugal innovation orientation become also oriented to value shared value, because as we see, there's a global pressure based on environmental conscious about the resources, about global resources, environmental resources. But when it comes to developed countries, we saw that based on new customers' demands and from developed countries for less costly products and with some environmental consciousness, as I can say, we saw that the frugal innovation become orientation to markets as a strategy for developed countries, and when it addressed both the context and also the social and economic environment, we had the most efficient way to address the frugal innovation as a strategy, addressing both developed countries and the main features that make these products address also social and environmental aspects. In the sequence, I developed a second research during my master's. The previous research I spoke was also part of my master's dissertation. As a second research, I did an empirical research addressing bricolage as capabilities for frugal innovation in emerging markets in times of crisis. Yes, as Professor Max introduced, I I focused my research on emerging markets, specifically the context of Brazilian multinational companies, subsidiaries, sorry. There are a lot of foreign companies doing business in Brazil, and Brazil is an emerging market, which has a lot of features that makes frugal innovation like something mandatory to address, to keep doing innovations in this country. And in this research, which I published in the European Journal of Innovation Management, the aim was to answer the following question: could bricolage become a capability for companies in emerging markets to develop frugal innovations in times of crisis? And why I did this? Because although the literature has addressed that frugal innovation has been developed in emerging markets, we lack some more understanding of the triggers. They put as the context of emerging markets as a requirement to develop frugal innovation. But what I address here is that the context of crisis, which is a mark of emerging markets, which is something common, it does not necessarily is the trigger or the starting point for frugal innovation. Actually, the context of crisis, it's the trigger of a capability necessary to develop, to perform the frugal innovation, which is the bricolage capability, which is when you deal with the resources you have at hand based on the resources scarcity you face. It's how you manage in a creative way the resources you have, making recombinations or attributing new purposes for the resources you have in order to perform innovation. So yeah, I analyzed and I argued in this study that the context of crisis does not directly impact on frugal innovation. It has an antecedent, a precedent factor that will make the frugal innovation more efficient, or it starts to happen in this context. And the frugal innovation, as this is an empirical research, this construct here is composed by 3 dimensions, which I mentioned. The frugal innovation, in order for innovation to be characterized as a frugal innovation, it has to have these 3 dimensions concerns, which is the substantial cost reduction, the focus on core functionalities, and the sustainable co-creation. But moving on, during my PhD thesis, why I analyzed the frugal innovation and then how it's linked to my PhD research, the master's research with the PhD. Because the frugal innovation, somehow, they tend to become a global innovation. Those innovations are so successful in emerging markets that they go through a process of reverse innovation. They tend to go through a reverse innovation process, and they tend to be fostered by companies in developed markets because those solutions are so efficient, either or in the production process, either for the customers as a target, that the companies from developed markets started to see those frugal innovations with a different perspective. But yeah, moving on to the PhD thesis research, which is my recent research, I developed a study which analyzed the development of organizational capabilities in foreign subsidiaries and the reverse knowledge transfer. So they are linked somehow in this point. They also has the reverse flow of knowledge or even of solutions from emerging markets to developed countries. But what's different in this research here is that I started to focus on micro foundations, which is when we have individual level variables, factors, providing organizational outcomes. So in this research here, I analyzed what's the role of local managers, subsidiary managers in emerging markets, in the process of local knowledge acquisition, subsidiary capability development, and reverse knowledge transfer for the potential application of those capabilities in other units of the multinational, be in the headquarters or sibling subsidiaries or the subsidiaries of the multinational corporation abroad. But as I said, in this in this research here, what's different is that where we have in the literature the main phenomenon, most of the research, most of the phenomena in the international business field is still in the literature addressed only from the perspective of organizational level variables. We still have a very few research addressing and putting more emphasis on individual level variables. And that's why that's the gap I saw in this research. And the micro foundations, which means the individual level variables, I started to address for this acknowledged process here of subsidiary local knowledge acquisition, capability development, and reverse knowledge transfer of the capabilities developed in those subsidiaries. The micro foundations, which is the individual level variable that I addressed, is the individual absorptive capacity of the managers, the manager's bricolage behavior, and the manager's knowledge influence. So as you can see, I analyze here individual level variables that are the trigger, the starting point of this process, and also the intervening, the mediating variable, the mediating practices, managerial practices from those managers that will contribute for this process to happen. And as a result, as an outcome of this research, I developed this framework. It's the main result, the main outcome, where we have here, I don't know if it's clear for you guys to see, but where we have the main phenomenon happening, and where we have the manager's initial role and the manager's complementary role for this process, and how this process and the influence of individual level variables, they will define somehow the subsidiary role for the multinational company. So for instance, as you have here, if you don't have the manager individual absorptive capacity, you won't, the managers won't provide the subsidiary local knowledge acquisition. And hence, there will be no subsidiary capability development based on the knowledge acquired from local customers, from local suppliers, from local partners, institutions, the knowledge from the host country, as I can say. And of course, if the company don't provide new capabilities based on this new knowledge, because it's a new knowledge also for the headquarters, for the multinational corporation, as it's a specific knowledge and somehow a tacit knowledge, there will be no reverse knowledge transfer of those capabilities. And the role of the subsidiary end up being just headquarter knowledge implementer. But once the manager engages in individual absorptive capacity to acquire local knowledge, those managers allow the company, the subsidiary, to acquire this local knowledge. But again, if this local knowledge is not applied, put into practice, adapted to the subsidiary, there will be no capability development and hence no reverse knowledge transfer. So the subsidiary end up with the subsidiary role of local knowledge integrator. It's just the company just catch the local knowledge and integrate, but it doesn't put into practice. It doesn't put it into the development of innovations or capabilities. But once the manager has the individual absorptive capacity, this skill, and also engages in the bricolage behavior, this is somehow will favor the subsidiary capability development. But again, if those capabilities, those innovations, those managerial practices developed in the subsidiary are not transferred, are not spread to the whole company, there is no reverse knowledge transfer in this process, the subsidiary end up with the local capability developer role. And in the end, when managers, the subsidiary managers have those three skills, individual absorptive capacity, managers' bricolage behavior, and the influence to shared knowledge, that's when the subsidiary reached the highest contribution role, as I can say, for the entire company, which is the global capability provider, capabilities that are useful or can solve managerial problems in other subsidiaries or in the headquarters. And finally, reaching the research project that I'm developing as a postdoc candidate, as I can say, how is it linked to the previous research where what I did in my PhD? I came up with this project which analyzes, again, the micro foundations, but of the reverse knowledge transfer and adoption. So here we have more a specific emphasis of the benefits and also the barriers faced by those managers to engage and to if the reverse knowledge transfer, if the reverse innovation are so beneficial for the company, why it's still as I can say a taboo, or it's still so difficult for managers, for companies to provide or to engage or to make this happen with more often, as I can say. In this study here, what I'm trying to analyze is how subsidiary managers can overcome those barriers and boost the reverse knowledge transfer and adoption in the context of multinational companies. So yeah, here the purpose, the aim is to analyze whether the successful implementation of reverse innovation strategies is determined by individual level factors, such as I will try to focus on what kind of micro foundations here, the transformational leadership, the entrepreneurial orientation, and the risk-taking behavior. Yeah, this is just an overview of what I did and how it's linked those research, how I try to go deeper in a specific type of knowledge during my knowledge development, my career development. And yeah, that's it. I hope I didn't take too long.
Not at all. Thank you very much, Leandro. You've been with us for the longest as well, 5 years, and I think this it's beautiful to see, how one topic builds on the next topic, builds on the next topic, and how you've been able to, really take each one of these stepping stones as a progress, as a progression going forward. And that's exactly how it should, quite frankly. It's beautiful to see. So thank you, Leandro. For sort of summarizing literally 3 major projects into just a few minutes. Markus, the time it's now for you to introduce us to one of the most recent projects that we have been starting and working on. Markus joined us only a few months ago, and but has already something to show, and I wanted to take the opportunity to give him the opportunity, in fact, to show us and talk to us a little bit about what it is that he has been doing. Markus, thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction and the opportunity. I'm gonna share my screen. Does it work?
Yes.
Yes, perfect. Yeah, I'm gonna talk quickly and swiftly about artificial intelligence and web data mining in global R&D location research. And basically, it doesn't change the slide. Basically, short introduction to myself. I did my bachelor's at the Technical University of Munich in management and technology. Had different positions in different digital startups. And different positions, and currently I'm doing a master's degree in business administration and e-business, and now I'm working as a research assistant at the Department of International Economics, Government and Business, and supporting Max research. And basically the main project I worked on and I'm continuing to work on is the R&D database Max already introduced in the beginning. So the current situation is that GLORAD collects information on R&D locations manually, meaning someone sits in front of the screen and searches for locations of companies and then puts them into a database. The existing database is on-premise and stores already more than 10,000 instances, but due to its size, it's performing not that well anymore. So that's also another pain point. And after some research, you could see that there are already projects which implemented AI and web data mining for data collection purposes. So that's kind of the research gap, you could say. But for myself, it's more of a, I would say, research enablement project less than a research project itself. So I'm trying to enable GLORAD to do their research with more data. So that's also leads up to my research question: how can AI and web data mining technologies be leveraged in global R&D location research? Basically, I put together a very quick and simplified graph, I would say. It's basically there are three. The process I looked for, or which I came up with in the end, was a prototype, which takes three main data sources. On the one hand, you have a search engine. So basically, like if you would do it manually, you look for a company and you look for the R&D locations. My prototype looks for a given company and filters the results of search engines according to their relevance. Meaning, if you look for, let's say, Siemens, you get back the Siemens homepage, all possibly relevant websites in relation to Siemens, which mention R&D platforms or R&D locations or technological development centers. A second main data source are job platforms, for example, LinkedIn. So in that sense that if a company publishes a job opening for a, let's say, head of R&D or head of innovation, my prototype in the best case catches this job opening and retrieves information from it. So let's say if it says located in Sao Paulo, I get this information. And the last data source is Scopus, the scientific search engine database. Scopus offers an API which lets you retrieve affiliations. So as you know, if you're affiliated with a company and publish research there, it will be available through Scopus, and I retrieve that information. Important for the first two data sources is that the data I retrieve is unstructured, meaning for the Siemens website and for the job opening, I get the text body of the website and the text body of the job description. But overall, it's very unstructured. There's no nice way to retrieve the data immediately or to analyze the data immediately. So what I'm doing is I make use of the beautiful tool which just recently came up. I use OpenAI and basically ChatGPT and the API. So I sent this very unstructured bunch of data with some predefined prompts and get back a very nice CSV readable file or CSV readable structure for my code. And in the end, this helps me to promote or to come up with recommended R&D locations mentioned in the text. So we started with this bunch of websites, very unstructured with a lot of text, and we ended up with a kind of beautiful CSV file ready for analysis in the last step. And overall, also because I already said we have an existing database, I also pushed the database to the cloud and changed the structure so it's scalable and can grow even further. And also I added a few data visualizations, but I think the main point here is the web crawling part, meaning for one search term, instead of sitting there for 1.5 hours or 2 hours per company, I get automatically back a set of predefined locations. And the nice thing about that, it's easily customizable. So if I say I want to look for production sites, I want to look for storefronts of a specific company, all I need to do is change a bit the code, but it's like very limited changes, and it will work as it would do for R&D locations. So it's fit for a lot of use cases. And I tried to be very quick. I think I was very quick. And I guess that's it from my side.
Thank you very much, Markus. You very humbly say that you are developing just, but quite frankly, this is an enormously important tool which makes life much easier for researchers. And other researchers, whether they are working as PhD students or already in faculty jobs, in the end, much of what they develop are tools, just tools as well, tools, maybe techniques. You're just in the somewhat fortunate situation that your tool is one of the more tangible ones. more technology oriented, perhaps. But in the end, I think it's going to be useful across the board, regardless. I cannot help observing the fact that you're all still students, and I think that was one of the main reasons why we've labeled this panel an emerging scholar panel. You all have studies going on at the same time. How do you manage this? How do you manage doing research? How do you manage doing this kind of work that is quite frankly beyond what a typical student should be doing or is doing, with your already demanding schedules as far as school programs, studies, exams, and so are concerned? How do you make this all work?
Well, I guess I can start. I know from myself, it's I think at least in Denmark or like Copenhagen or also CBS is very much focused on doing work also besides your studies, and enables or facilitates that. And so it's kind of expected that you work a part-time job, and therefore it's, for me myself at least, I think it's quite welcoming, and I really enjoy doing the research project on the side.
I feel also that some of the research skills are also transferable to other courses. When writing a paper, then after a certain time you sort of get the structure, and also the understanding of code, and also practice in R is also really helpful after some time, because then it's maybe easier to start a regression, or the troubleshooting becomes easier because you already can rely on the knowledge from the research project.
Yeah. Thank you. Good points. I think, Leandro, you've been obviously working on this for quite some time as well, most recently as a PhD student. So I think there's a natural overlap. And let me actually upgrade this question for you first, Leandro. With the work that you are doing, obviously, I hope that Ralf and Markus are going to have an opinion on this as well. With the work that you're doing, how do you see that actually becoming meaningful to practice, to management practice, to what companies, to what managers are actually doing, what people are actually doing when they're working in large companies, when they're working in startup companies? How does what you do relate to them, possibly impact them?
Well, Professor, that's a good question. I still believe that as I'm focusing more now on micro foundations, I feel that I am more close to managers, to the individuals, because in the beginning, in my master's course, I analyzed those models from organizational perspective, point of view, but I felt that somehow this was a bit shallow for me. I needed to see more deeply, not just how companies do something or improve something, but who are those individuals behind those processes, and how they manage this, how they do this, how they contribute somehow. So I think that my work engages with managers more in the sense that I believe that the insights I provided by the outcomes, I think those insights can better guide managerial practices. Once I understand how they do, I can organize and develop those frameworks for them to see in which stage or what kind of skills they have or don't, and what stage the company, the role the company has for the corporation, and see how they can reach higher levels of skills or roles. And
Leandro, let me just ask a clarification question here. But in my understanding, you are working mostly with managers working in Brazil. They may be working for all sorts of companies. I think many of them are working for international, non-Brazilian companies. But mostly, you're actually investigating the practices, the best practices, really and here not just best practices in Brazil, but really globally best practices, cutting edge way of solving problems that are being created in Brazil and are being, and that is sort of the challenge I think that you're looking at, that are somehow being transported to other parts of the world. So what have you sort of found really, really cool, interesting as part of that research? Always say, that's actually pretty cool coming out of Brazil. That's something that other companies, other countries should be taking notice of.
Well, it's really, that's a good point, Professor. I see a lot of the cultural distance, as Ralf has mentioned. I see that Brazil has a specific context, and also the Brazilian managers has some specific behavioral features that sometimes help them with those managerial practices, but sometimes also affect them in developing more autonomy and putting into practice their knowledge, which is sometimes end up tacit for the rest of the corporation. I don't know if this answers your question, but specifically, I want to understand which skills those subsidiary managers should have to promote the development of innovations, through innovations, for instance, or organizational capabilities, and how they can make this knowledge more available to other units. So I think this is the main challenge that we have here, and that could be addressed and try to solve, and that perhaps in other markets, in the markets from those developed countries, from those multinational headquarters, they have less. They face less as a challenge. I think they are more opening, and we still have some aspects and features that make Brazilian managers have their knowledge more tacit for the rest of the corporation.
Yeah, I think what you're working on is nicely connecting to what Ralf and Markus are working on as well. Markus, you've been looking at this global footprint of companies and their R&D footprint, literally. The only way for multinationals to transfer leading edge technologies and knowledge is in fact very often through this R&D network, because this is where these techniques, these technologies are not just created, but just at some point absorbed and then passed on. So in that sense, your work is laying the structural foundations for what Leandro and Ralf are working on in the next stage. And at the same time, I think, Ralf, what you've been doing with these cultural distances, and I'm glad that you pointed us out, how these cultural distances pose a dilemma. On the one hand, they're supposed to stimulate more creative work. On the other hand, they also impose a transactional economic cost. And that sort of, the stronger the creative component, the stronger the transactional cost in the end. And I think I see that analogy also in what Leandro is working on. I almost sense that the stronger the Brazilian element in coming up with something new, the more difficult it is to communicate this to another culture, to another office, to somewhere else, a different subsidiary, even within the same firm, where you would assume, hope perhaps, they would at least have the same organizational culture. But it's still super difficult to make that happen. I think there's an interesting analogy at the very least, and perhaps there's even more in it, and that's something for Leandro to work on, and he's working on it, I'm sure. What these, as the research now call it, micro foundational aspects are in making this all work. Yeah, we actually only have 3 minutes left. Time's flying. I think before we sort of engage, and I've been sort of looking a little bit into the chat window, which one of those questions to take up on. But I think given the time that we have left only, if each one of you could just briefly, sort of in 1 minute, give advice to, from your experience, give advice, one piece of advice that you would give to as a student or maybe an early stage researcher, how to make the most of the time that you have in engaging with a project like this. What have you learned about doing what you are doing? And maybe we go with seniority here, and we start with Leandro, and then Markus, and then Ralf.
Professor, this is still a question that comes to my mind and makes me wonder a lot. My main challenge is still how to teach without having practical experience in a multinational corporation. It's the companies I study, but I don't have the skill. That's a big challenge. So I think one way to manage this, to solve this, it's also try to align, when you are developing a project, more empirical work, like you can engage in consultancy work, as I can say, while developing your teaching skills and research skills. I think this is hard because I still didn't manage this well. So this is the biggest challenge.
Thank you, Leandro. I'm sure you have done a lot, and I'm sure you've improved a lot, but from your own point of view, obviously you only see so much more work to be done. I'm in the same situation. I still think there's I could improve too. Thank you, Leandro. Markus.
Well, I guess for myself, it's mostly about setting boundaries, especially on the project, because like the final prototype, it would never have been finished. Like there's always things to do. There's always another function to add and another small bug which needs to be fixed, and it's never going to end. So I think sometimes it's just really necessary also like to set boundaries, to say, okay, that's it. I'm not going to add anything more. It works like this. It's fine. It looks good. And yeah, I guess that's the main point.
Yeah. Thank you. I remember how you've been mentioning that you've been applying the design methodology. And I wish we would have something like that would actually extend into regular academic projects as well, because academic projects notoriously are over time, over budget. So there would be a lot to learn for other scholars as well. Thank you, Markus.
Thank you.
Ralf, the last word is yours.
So when I'm thinking about
no pressure.
Question, 3 words come to my mind. So I'd say for academic projects, at least from my experience, even though it might be a bit limited, is I'd say persistence, curiosity, and interest. Because I think those 3 things should be somehow interconnected, because interest helps you in driving the project forward, and also into looking into additional fields or maybe additional data sets to not only scratch the surface, but also engage with the topic more deeply.
Yeah, thank you. It may not have been entirely clear, but I just wanted to remind everybody, because Ralf was first to speak, that he's been working on this for, I think, 2 years or 3 years.
Started in 2020, I think.
3 years. So if he speaks about persistence, you know what he's talking about, because he's really been pushing this forward at great personal time commitment and cost in order to make that work. So maybe at this point, also a big heartfelt thank you to you, Ralf, to be so persistent, in fact, and pushing this forward all the time.
Thank you.
And I'm sure Markus and Leandro deserve the same recognition. Markus, maybe a tiny little bit less so, because you really only started a couple of months ago. But who knows? Maybe 5 years from now you will be back on this panel again, and you will remember. But we'll have to draw to a close with this panel. Leonardo just reminded me that we have no time left, and I think it's important to have a proper conclusion so that the next panel can start in time. So I appreciate all 3 of you to speak freely about your concerns and your interests in this. Moacir, thank you very much thank you much for setting this up for us. Again, we're always
And here learning
to
a
be.
lot with the new researchers.
Yes.
The generation
Please.
of the GLORAD researchers.
And I'm glad that you had a chance to meet him. I know you know Leandro from before, but now you know Markus and Ralf as well. If there's any way how they can actually come to Brazil, Sao Paulo at some point and do research,
Let's do that for
directly
sure.
on site, we should make that happen.
Let's do that for sure.
Good, excellent. Thank you, Moacir.
Next year we have the conference again. Let's talk about that.
Okay, will do.
Hopefully, São Paulo will be the host. São Paulo in the University of São Paulo will be the host of the next year's Triple Helix Association Conference as well. We have the result next week in Barcelona. Let's see. Let's all together. I hope everyone here, everyone will be here.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Moacir, for having us. All right. And I think we will dial off. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, everybody.
Congrats. Thank you very much. Very good. Leandro, você está gastando inglês aí, hein? Gostei de ver, hein, pô. Mas você falou muito mais do que os outros, hein, cara?
Quantos minutos eu falei?
Não sei, meu, você gastou mais do que os outros dois somados. Sem
Mas é porque eu
dúvida.
tenho mais pesquisa desenvolvida, né?
Não, e a culpa não é sua, é do moderador. Então eu tenho que puxar a orelha do Max. Ele que tem que controlar o tempo de cada um. Mas a gente está online ainda.
Você está em Copenhague agora, professor?
Não, estou em São Paulo City.
Você está indo quando?
Estou indo para Copenhague, eu vou passar o mês de outubro. Você vai estar por aí?
Outubro? Não, já voltei em março.
Vai ter uma conferência também do Outward FDI for Emerging Markets. Aí eu encaixei já para estar aí também na conferência, porque o SciBiz está virando um festival, né? Então a gente está trazendo, esse ano nós temos 12 eventos, side events, eventos menores dentro do SciBiz. Então a gente está trazendo aí tipo Helix. Esse ano tem o Real Digital do Banco Central.
Legal.
Tem um da área de saúde para neurodivergentes, né, que são autistas e outros. Temos vários. Acho que a gente
cresceu, né, professor? Nossa.
Acho que precisamos desligar aqui, viu, cara? Que o outro tá
bom, então.
Chegando aí.
Você vai gostar muito lá de Copenhague, professor. Aproveita a oportunidade.
Eu fui 2 vezes a Copenhague.
Mas não morou, né? Eu passei uma coisa. Lá você vai ver como é legal. Então tá, professor. Rever, viu? Tudo de bom.
Bom, pessoal, e também espectadores, agora a gente está encerrando o segundo painel e nós vamos começar o terceiro painel e último da manhã daqui a 10 minutos. Então, todo mundo espera que daqui a pouco a professora Fernanda Caim, da SPM, vai chegar e a gente já começa. Obrigado.
Tá bom, obrigado. Tchau, tchau.
Obrigado, Leonardo.
com as desculpas para não procurar o Sebrae. É empreendedor? Ligue, mande um zap, vá ao Sebrae ou ele vai até você. Ah, e tem tudo no portal. Sebrae, a força do empreendedor brasileiro.